family we had discussed. So yesterday we had started discussing our institutions of family and marriage, and within family we had discussed what is a family, what are functions of the family, what are criticisms of these functions, and how these functions have been changing over the years. Along with it, we talked about various kinds of family. We looked into nuclear and joint families on the basis of size, and how these joint families are now transitioning into nuclear families. Then we also looked into various factors responsible for this change. Now, this is just a depiction of what kind of new families are coming up. But if I ask you a question, wherein you have to say how this institution of family is changing. So if I ask you this question, how is this institution of family changing? What would you do? The first thing is that we have to figure out which all dimensions have to be looked into, rather than starting right away with the change that is happening. Say that joint families are getting converted into nuclear families, there are new forms of families coming up, etc. Better than this, what you can do is you can first find out which all dimensions and various features of the family need to be looked into. So can someone suggest what are the various features in which we have to look for this change? So, Femina, when you say urbanization, modernization, these are factors of change. We are talking about what kind of changes are being brought about to this institution of family. Okay, so biological features, authority, economic function, size. Okay, so first thing is that you think about what are the various functions of family and how are they changing. Then you think about the size of the family, size and composition of the family, and then you come into the finer features of family. If you remember, we had discussed various features like distribution of authority, the relationship between members of the family. Yes. So first thing you do is you create the broader framework, and then only you start discussing what are the changes. So in functions, you can talk about your economic function. Then you can think of biological function. Move ahead with psychological functions. Similarly, when you talk about features, you talk about distribution of authority, relationship between members of the family, so this is how you talk about it, this is how you discuss it. So rather than starting right away with say the authority structure has changed, then to go on talking about functions, etc., it's better to finalize the dimensions first, in which all dimensions we have to see. Why do you have to do this is because you cannot expect direct questions from what we discuss. Yes, there can be direct questions, and that's what we'll keep on telling you, that this is a question which can become important, etc. But otherwise, when you find a question in the examination, you would not know the exact answer. So what you have to do is you have to break it down, you have to conceptualize the answer, and this is a process that I would suggest everyone to follow. The first thing is, when you look at the question, try to first think about the draft. How do you write the answer? Think in terms of what can be the introduction, what can be the body and conclusion to this question. Then you think about, say, the question is saying that how is the institution of family changing? So one idea is, yes, the institution of family is changing, and what can be the factors responsible for the same. Then the other idea is, family has retained a lot of its traditional features. Don't you think that is also another dimension? That family has retained a lot of features from the traditional families. So the answer becomes simple for you. So in the introduction, you can talk about briefly what are the factors of change. Then you have this in the form of body, where you talk about what all features of the family are changing. How is the function of family changing? How is the size of family changing? What are the new forms of families coming up? And the new forms of families that are coming up, you have to mention those as example. So for instance, when you say that the authority structure has changed, then you talk about joint to nuclear family and how authority is now distributed. Similarly, when you talk about the function of socialization, you say that new forms of families are coming up, and now this function of socialization is being taken up by specialized institutions like your schools, like your creches, like your daycare. And then you come to conclusion. In the conclusion, you can use the alternate perspective, which says that family has retained a few features which are traditional. Now, this part also has to be dealt briefly, like your introduction. And what you can do here is just think about a few features. If you remember from our discussion yesterday, we had mentioned a few features where you did not find a lot of change. So we can use those here to write this answer. So I hope this question, the structure of the answer is something that you can understand now. Just give a quick thumbs up for me to know that we can move ahead with this. Great. And please do try writing these answers. And I hope a few of you are already writing answers. Now, the next institution is your institution of marriage. Now, while discussing family, we have discussed marriage a bit. We have discussed how marriage is one of the bonds which is responsible for this institution called marriage. Now, marriage is an institution for admitting men and women. And please, when I go through this definition, try thinking of the exceptions. Try thinking of the changes that have happened. So, an institution for admitting men and women into family life, legitimizing offsprings, and establishing other rights and obligations of the husband, wife, and children. That is your family members. So, marriage would admit men and women into a family. Now, when you do this, when you admit men and women in an institution, you legitimize it by holding various ceremonies, wedding ceremonies, so that people know that these two persons, these two individuals have entered this relationship of marriage. Then the idea is also about legitimizing these offsprings, because a child born out of a marriage which has been legitimized by the society is a legitimate child. And then then also this institution of marriage talks about various rights and obligation of family members. Can you think of any kind of rights and obligations that your institution of marriage provides? And also, you can do one thing, whenever you have a different question wherein it can be addressed simply, try to write it in doubt section. Otherwise, whenever we are having this discussion, stick to your chat section. Yes, so your rights can be legal with your Hindu Marriage Act. Yes, so the idea of staying loyal, idea of being in this relationship and not starting another family elsewhere, the idea of taking care of each other's emotional, psychological needs, The idea of behaving as one family, sharing your economic resources, being honest, etc. So various rights and obligations are also established with this institution of marriage. Now think about this definition. We're saying that it is an institution for admitting men and women into family. Now, is it necessarily going to be men and women? Is it necessarily be going to heterosexual? Let's, without going into the legality of it. Yes, we know that same-sex marriage is something that is under discussion right now. But yes, we have to see what goes around. But otherwise, is it necessarily going to be men and women? No, because you find that people from the same gender also get married, which is to be discussed, right? Then is it necessary to have offsprings? Is it necessary to procreate and have children? And again, the answer is no. Then the rights and obligations that are established right at the beginning, do they follow them necessarily? Don't you find divorce happening? Because according to, say, Hindu marriage, the traditional Hindu marriage, you'll find that marriage was considered something sacred. Marriage was something that you could not have, say, separated the husband and the wife later. It was supposed to be an intergenerational contract. But now you find that it has become more contractual in nature. It is not sacred anymore. And with the introduction of divorce by your 1955 Act, you find that it is not always necessary to follow these rights and obligations. Yes, even monogamy is contradictory because you find people engaged in polygamy. You find people starting families with multiple partners. Moving with various functions of the of marriage, the way we had discussed functions of family, you'll find most of them mentioned here as well, because marriage is one of the bonds that is there in family. So one idea is sexual gratification, procreation, or childbirth. Then economic cooperation and security. So if you are married, if it is a husband and wife, they generally share their economic resources. They take care of each other's and the family's security, various economic needs, various social needs. And another important idea is providing each other emotional support, companionship. And this idea of emotional support was there in family and marriage as well, because in a family there can be other members apart from husband and wife. But when we talk about this bond of marriage, find it is between two individuals who will provide emotional support to each other till the end of their life. So another idea about this companionship and emotional support is related to your elderly, because it is over a period of time that you find that your life expectancy has increased. Previously the life expectancy was low, and generally you'll find people used to stay in joint families, so these emotional needs could have been taken care of. But now with increase in life expectancy, people moving towards monogamy, you find that this becomes a very important function of this institution of marriage. Now what can be various types of marriage? One idea is a husband and a wife. It's only two individuals getting into this institution of marriage. Then the other idea is, and this is something that you generally find, this is something universal in every society, you find that monogamy is something that most of the people go for. Then there is another idea of polygamy. Now in polygamy, what happens is there can be one husband and multiple wives, or there can be one wife and multiple husbands. That is one way of looking at it. Now this polygamy can have various reasons. Let's first look at what are the various types of polygamy. So the first one is polyandry. Now polyandry is where you have one wife and she's getting married to multiple boys or multiple husbands. she'll have multiple husbands. Then if we talk about polyandry, these multiple husbands, you can find they can either be brothers, they can be related by blood, or they can be not they can not be, say, related by blood. So if they are related by blood, it is called fraternal polyandry. So the husbands here are related, are brothers basically. And you have example in the form of Mahabharata. And also you'll find wherever a polyandry, the general reason is wherever you'll find the sex ratio is skewed in favor of male members, you would not be able to find a perfect match for everyone. And this is, yes, polygamy in general has been something that was prevalent in past, not prevalent at that level because it was also limited to a certain sections. But also you find that uh, take example of Haryana in the past few years, find that the sex ratio was not proper, was not in favor of women. And because of this low sex ratio, it was not possible to get a match for every boy. And because of which, one problem was of trafficking of women, because a lot of women were either kidnapped or bought from various regions, particularly East India. And then also you found this fraternal polyandry prevalent. But yes, things are changing now. And also there can be non-fraternal polyandry. Even if you think of these husbands who might not be brothers, and you can find these examples in Nayars of Kerala. Now again, you remember that polygamy has been on decline. I'll show you the numbers ahead. But polygamy is something that is not practiced widely, and not just in India but across the globe. Then you have something called polygyny, wherein you'll have one husband who will have multiple wives. That one boy is getting married to multiple girls. And this is an example that you find. Think of your rulers, various kings in the past. But generally, you find that this is also limited to the affluent sections. And also, another reason is that you find polygyny in Muslims. Not now, it is not that prevalent. But otherwise, you find polygyny, particularly in the Middle East, because men would go out for war. During wars, what happens? A lot of men are lost. A lot of men encounter death. Now, what happens to the family that they have left behind? And because of which you find that polygyny as a practice came in practice, that it was not marriage per se, but it was the individuals or the men who are left, they will take care of the other widows. So it did not it started basically as a practice to provide security to the widows of the people who have been lost during wars. But yes, it got crystallized and took a different shape over the years. But again, you'll find that polygamy is something that is not practiced widely. Here are a few numbers that you can look into. Then you'll find that over the years, there has been a decline in polygamy and particularly polygyny. And polyandry is something not, is something of an exception. Right. So if you look at the numbers, one idea is that we cannot just limit it to a particular religion. You find it prevalent in pretty much every religion. And then there are exceptions wherein you find a few states have more prevalence of polygyny compared to others. Look at Chhattisgarh. Look at Andhra Pradesh. Yes, polygamy for that matter is on a decline, but there are few states where you find more prevalence compared to other places. And also, again, if you remember the idea of socialization, you find it is ultimately the social laws which will decide what happens in the society. So there can be societies where it is perfectly normal, then there can be societies where it can be thought of a taboo. And yes, most of you would not have been, say, able to relate with particularly polyandry. Apart from the example from your Mahabharata, you would not have been able to relate to polyandry, that one girl having multiple husbands. So just go through this during revision, and you'll find out that polygamy also has something to do with your socio-economic standards, socio-economic level of development. So you'll find generally prevalent in the illiterate, the poor, and generally, if you look at it, you'll find that it has also something to do with religion. That a few religions practice more of polygamy, and particularly polygyny. Polygyny is where you, one person, one husband has multiple wives. So this is just to give you an idea about how prevalent polygamy is. So yes, if you look at the numbers, it is not much. Now we have a few rules of spouse selection. Remember, this is something that you do not have to remember. This is something just for understanding. You do not have to remember anything. Yes, let them be there in your notes so that you can use as an example. So if we talk about how the institution of marriage is changing, if we talk about various alternative perspectives, this will be helpful, but you do not have to remember. Now, one idea is, when we talk about rules of spouse selection, the first thing is it has to be someone of the opposite gender. Right? This is the first starting point. This is something that we know. Another idea is, with relation to caste, we have seen that endogamy is something important. Endogamy is something that is being practiced. So another idea is endogamy that we know. And also, anyone coming from little touch with the rural background would know about exogamy. That means if you are from a particular village, you cannot marry anyone from that village. If you are from this family, you are not supposed to marry within the family. And also, in few places, you'll find that it is not just limited to your village. It can be any other village which shares a boundary with your village, because it is considered that people living in this region, people living in all these villages, generally come from the same ancestors and are hence brothers and sisters. So exogamy is exo exclude, endo include. That's how you can remember it. Another idea is, you cannot marry within your own clan, own, say, if you understand Gotra, you're not supposed to marry within those. So that is the practice of exogamy, that you are supposed to marry outside this. And also, you find that when it comes to marriage, you are not supposed to, if you think of marrying someone related by blood, for example, a boy marrying his own mother, or a father marrying his own daughter, or siblings marrying each other. Now, this is something which is frowned upon. This is something called incest taboo. And again, this is something uh, universal. This is something that you would not find anywhere. Yes, there are few tribes in Africa where you can find it as an exception, but generally you find that it is being frowned upon across the globe. So not marrying someone related by blood. Then you have hypergamy and hypogamy. These are related to your caste system. Now, one idea of intercaste marriage is that it is prohibited. It is not supposed to be done. But in a few cases, it is acceptable. Those few cases are called hypergamy or anulom viva, which says a girl can marry a boy from a relatively upper caste. That a girl, say, think of a Shudra girl, she is allowed to to a certain extent, she is allowed to marry someone from any of the three castes that are there. But if you talk about hypogamy, that is pratilom viva, this is something again not practiced at all. This is where a girl marries a boy from a relatively lower caste. So a Brahmin girl marrying a Vaishya, a Brahmin girl marrying a Shudra. This is something which is not practiced. And generally you find, even generally in cases of your intercaste marriages, be it Anulom or be it Pratilom, you find that generally the ones who got married, who got into this intercaste marriage, are generally outcasted. The families ask them to leave the home if they are going for this marriage. But now, yes, it is getting a little normal these days, particularly in your urban areas. But again, you find that most of the people still choose to marry within their own caste. Then there are other ideas. One is parallel cousin marriage, and then the other one is cross cousin marriage. Now think of parallel cousin marriage. So I'll just show you using this thing. So there were a grandfather and grandmother married. They had children. Say your father and mother, and also your uncle, and then your aunt. They had children. They also had children. Now children coming from uncles, from these two brothers, are considered parallel cousins. And if, say, there was a third one, which was, say, your aunt, your father's sister, she also gets married to someone, they have a children. Now, if you talk about this, your father's sister's children are considered to be your cross cousins. Similarly, your mother's sister's children are your parallel cousins, and your mother's brother's children are your cross cousins. Now, you do not have to remember this, so let it be. You do not have to remember anything. The simple idea you can remember is, when it is parallel cousin, think of two brothers and their children, or two sisters and their children. They'll be parallel cousins. And if you think of cross cousins, one male, one female, that means brother and sister and their children, they are considered cross cousins. And in South India, you'll find that cross cousin marriage is something uh, that is practiced. And in a few castes, it is also the preferred form of marriage. This cross cousin marriage is a preferred form of marriage in southern part of the country, in a few castes. But if you talk about parallel cousin marriage, it is something that you'll find in Muslims. It is something you'll find in Muslims. You would have seen that a Muslim boy marrying his uncle's daughter, which is what? Parallel cousin marriage. This parallel cousin marriage is not seen a lot in other communities and other religions for that matter. And now the basic idea between this parallel cousin and cross cousin marriage is to retain the property within the family, within the same kinship. That if you marry your cross cousin or your parallel cousin, the property that is there, the property the entire kinship unit has, will stay within the family. That is what the idea behind this is. Now, also think of a case where, say, two people got married, one of them passes away. Say the husband passes away. So, if the husband passes away, he'll leave a widow behind. There'll be that wife who would not have any partner. And this widow, if she is married to her husband's brother, this is called levirate marriage. Similarly, if there is a widower, if say the wife passes away and the husband is now married to his wife's sister, it is called sororate marriage. Now, these levirate and sororate marriages are something that you would have found as an example in your movies. A lot of Hindi movies have this kind of practice that is being depicted. And also, if you're coming from, say, a traditional joint family, you'd find this kind of practice, because generally widow remarriage was something that was not permitted. But yes, over the years it happened so that it became a little normal. But still, the remarriage would happen within the same family, within the same kinship. So these are a few rules of spouse selection. This is something you do not have to remember. This is just for a basic understanding that how people go for spouse selection. Because the first idea is it has to be opposite gender. And if you look at traditional families, it was never about the how compatible the boy and the girl are. But now we find there is a change. Now it is more about the compatibility between the girl and the boy, and not family compatibilities. So even the rules of spouse selection are going under change. Now let's see. Yes, so in Nadia ke par hum aapke hain kaun. So please do not watch a lot of movies. Please stick to your studies. Yeah, I know these are old movies and you would have watched it as kids, but yeah. So just for the sake of examples of marriage, family, etc., please do not watch movies. Let there be other reasons to watch movies. Okay, so let's talk about what kind of changes have happened to this institution of marriage. Now, one thing is that we find polygamy is not something common now. It has been on a decline. We have seen that NFHS data, NFHS fifth surveys data. So we are moving more towards monogamous marriages. Now, even when it comes to monogamy, you'll find that often there are two ways that yes, you got married, and there can be reasons to get separated. So one idea is one of the partner passing away, and the other idea is divorce. And you'll find it to this extent that people now do not even go for a second marriage. If the wife passes away, they they take up the responsibility of the children single-handedly. And also, even after separation, people generally now do not go for another marriage. And also, if we talk about polygamy and monogamy, polygamy is only considered when a person has two wives together, for instance, or a wife has two husbands at the same time. It is not considered to be polygamous once one of the partner has passed away. Then the rules of spouse selection have changed. Now it is generally, even if it is an arranged marriage, they ask the boy and the girl to meet up, have discussion, find out what are their interests, what are the shared interests, how is it that they want to look, how do they want to be in the future, how they what kind of idea they have about this family, what are their career goals, etc. So now it is more of self selection of spouse rather than parents. So yes, the hunt for a perfect spouse is initiated by parents, but generally it is ultimately up to the boy and the girl that they have to select the spouse themselves. Then now again, it is, if they are having discussion, it is more about compatibility between the boy and the girl, and it has not a lot to do with family compatibility. But again, you'll find that it is generally you get a match based on your socio-economic status of the family. You generally would not find a match from, say, people or families coming from the opposite socio-economic background. So generally it is again within, so even the families for that matter would be compatible. Then now intercaste and interreligious marriages are being more acceptable now. Age of the marriage has also increased with legislation and with time. Because now you think about this. Previously, traditionally, girls did not go for studies. They were not allowed to go for studies, and particularly higher studies. And they were married off at a very young age. But now, with a push towards girl education, be it by your government, be it in general, because the society uh, has become a better place compared to before, for that matter. So now, because of your education, because of your job, because of various other reasons, the age of marriage has increased. Also, if we talk about divorce, now, as mentioned, that particularly in Hindus, marriage was considered something sacred, and there's no way to break up a marriage. But with your Hindu Marriage Act 1955, it is something that can be broken off. So they have provided provisions for divorce. Also, traditionally, dowry was something attached to a marriage. Dowry is something that the girl's family will give as a present to the boy's family. Girl's family giving something, giving gold, giving money, giving a car, property, etc., to the boy's family. So even though it is prohibited, even though things have changed, even though we call ourselves modern, but this is something which has not been going down. Dowry is something we still find prevalent. And you'll find in your local newspapers, if there is a family and they say we are not going to take any kind of dowry, it you'll find a mention in the newspaper that this is a family who have not accepted any kind of dowry. It happened to a friend of mine. So their family did not accept dowry, and it found a mention in the newspaper. So even though it is something illegal, it is something that is prohibited by law, but it is practiced widely. And this is another example of your social law, your social norms not going hand in hand with your legality. So there are legal laws prohibiting dowry, but the society has not accepted that law, and it is still prevalent. Then also, when it comes to the relationship between the husband and the wife, things have changed a bit. We are moving a little towards egalitarianism, but again, we still find that there is this gender inequality that persists in the family. Think about both the husband and wife uh, having a job. They both have to go for work. It is generally the wife who will be taking care of her job and the other household responsibilities. She'll be the one who'll wake up in the morning, prepare the lunch, prepare the breakfast, prepare the lunch, then get ready for the office and leave. So, yes, we find that gender equality is still something distant. So, these are a few changes that you can find with respect to marriages. And also, the idea is if you find something related to your various institutions, like new forms of families coming up, or any kind of changes happening in the institution of marriage, please make sure that it finds a mention in your notes. So this is one example of an article that was there in the news. And yes, you can just go through this article during revision. So Vimal is asking a question that why an affluent family cannot ensure her daughter's luxury post marriage if she wishes to. So the basic question is, if there is a girl coming from a rich family being married off to someone in a poor family, and if the family of the girl wants their daughter to live in luxury, to maintain the same standard of life, that practically should not be able to, because of the socioeconomic status of the other family. Is it something that should be acceptable? Now, again, there can be contradictory points. It is based particularly on an individual's opinion. How do they think about this? Because the law would not say anything about this at all. right? Because it permits gifts to the girl. So the parents are permitted to give gifts to their daughter, for that matter. But the idea is, when you talk about dowry, it is something negative, that it is something demanded by the boy's family. When you talk about gifts, it is something that you give, it is something that is offered to the girl, right? So that's where the difference is. But because we find that even this is accepted, because we have to move according to the level of our society. So just because gifts are okay during marriages, you find that the demands for dowry have not subsided. So just think about this. Just think about this, that at times the government has to take stringent actions to make people stay away from committing something negative. Just think about this. Just take example of two things. There is one dedicated bus corridor that you found in Delhi for some time. Then if there is someone coming from Jaipur, they would know about these dedicated bus corridors, wherein only the buses are allowed to ply. Only the buses can use that corridor, and no private vehicles, be it car, bikes, etc., can ply on that road. Then there is this idea of your metro line that you find in various cities, or say your railway lines. Both ideally serve the same purpose. Both promote public transport. Both prioritize public transport as compared to private vehicles, right? The intention is same. But if you look at dedicated bus corridors, because of lack of enforcement, you'll find a lot of your Scorpios, Fortuners plying on that road. A lot of cars, uh, private vehicles plying on that road. Why? Because it is not enforced properly. But if you think of metro rails, metro lines, they are also giving the same kind of service, but there is a deterrent there. You cannot possibly take your car up on a metro line and use that in case of traffic. But in case of traffic, people definitely use these dedicated bus corridors. So yes, at times government has to take actions wherein they make people stay away from committing something wrong, committing a crime. So yes, laws are as good as their enforcement. Similarly, a policy is as good as its implementation. So see, Santosh, the question you are asking again has a moral, say, connotation to it, and it is something that should ideally be answered in your ethics classes. And again, the moment you say dowry, so basically the question is, if your father-in-law offered you dowry, will you accept or reject it? Now, the basic idea is, if it is dowry, then obviously it has to be rejected, because it is, again, leave the morality behind, it is prohibited by law. But if they offer to gift something to their daughter, that is up to them. That is entirely up to them. And generally in Hindus, you'll find the practice of Kanyadan, which basically turned into dowry. And the idea is that traditionally girls were not given a share in the family property. I hope you know that. Girls were not given share in the family property. And it was this Kanyadan that was considered to be equivalent of her share in the property. So yes, when getting you married, we have given your due share to you, and now you cannot demand a share in the property. Now this is something social. There's no, say, a legal laws behind it. Yes, so it can be considered as a loophole to your Dowry Prohibition Act. Okay, yes. So when it comes to dowry, or the idea Wibble is saying is that when it comes to any kind of presents, that we say that civil servants are not supposed to take any presents. The basic idea is that once you take something from someone, now you are obliged to give it back, and that might lead to poorer decisions in the future. Okay, let's move to another salient feature of the Indian society, which is diversity in India. Now we see that India is a diverse country. Think about geography. We have hills, we have plains, we have plateau, right? So we have a lot of geographical diversity. Think in terms of diversity of language. We have a lot of linguistic diversity. People speaking Bengali, Hindi, Kannada, Malayalam, etc. A lot of languages are there, a lot of major languages, and then you have you have even more numbers of dialects when it comes to language that are being spoken across the country. Similarly, when you talk about religion, there are a lot of religions that originated here, be it Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism. Then there are a lot of other religions which have entered from other areas. For example, Islam, Christianity, Zoroastrianism, right? Then we have a multiplicity of class of caste. More than 4,000 castes are there in India, and again, there can be no definite number attached to it. But yes, it is definitely more than 4,000. Then you have multiple tribes. So if you talk about central India, you have the maximum weightage of tribals living there. Then you have tribes in the northeast, you have tribes in the Andaman, you have tribes in the Rajasthan, in the area or the region of Rajasthan. So you have a lot of tribal diversity. And even within these tribals, you'll find a lot of diversity. In the sense that when we say tribals, a few of them are engaged in agriculture, a lot of them still believe in hunting and gathering. Then there are the ones who are nomads who move from one place to another. Then different economic activities, differences in basis of on the basis of residence. Then different levels of socio-economic development, right? So there is a lot of diversity within these institutions as well. So if you talk about Hindu religion, then you have a lot of sects for that matter. So you have people worshipping a particular god. Then you have other people worshipping the same god but have different rituals, right? So there is a lot of diversity within these institutions as well. So India, for that matter, is the most diverse country on the face of earth. But with this diversity, do you think there can be certain problems? With this diversity, can you think of various problems that can happen? So people can fight on the basis of religion, that I belong to this religion, you belong to other religion, our interests are not similar, that leading to some kind of violent act. And similarly, fights on the basis of language, people struggling on the basis of territory, sharing of water, river water. So yes, this diversity can lead to a lot of conflicts. It can manifest in form of communal violence, it can manifest in form of regional violence, etc. And we have a lot of examples to demonstrate that yes, this diversity has at times led to a lot of violent conflicts. And you have conflicts going on right now, say communal conflicts going on in Haryana, then you have communal conflicts going on in Manipur, right? So you have various examples of conflicts that have happened because of this diversity. But the idea is, even with this huge diversity that India has, we have still maintained our unity. India is still one united entity. Irrespective of this diversity, we have maintained our unity. So one question is, what are the reasons for that? Another idea is, if we talk about uniformity, so if we say that conflicts are happening because of diversity, conflicts might happen because of diversity, so should we go for uniformity? That if everyone is similar, everyone looks similar for that matter, would that lead to unity? Because think of uniformity within a tribe. Think of uniformity within a tribe. Now, all the members of that tribe will look similar. They'll follow the same norms. They believe in community living. So yes, it can look like that uniformity. Take example of tribes. Can something that can lead to unity because of this uniformity within the tribe. You find that their bonds are very strong, they believe in community living. And think of this, they do not even have a concept of private property. They cultivate the same community land without any conflict. Why? Because they are uniform in character. So, yes, we can argue for the case that uniformity can definitely lead to unity. Then another idea is how about unity through diversity? Is uniformity the only way to achieve unity? Because with uniformity, you'll find people fighting, still fighting, even after having something, even after sharing similar traits, people fighting amongst each other. You can take examples from any Western country for that matter. You can take examples from your neighborhood. The people are sharing the same kind of culture. People might be from the same religion, caste, everything, but they still go on fighting. So uniformity can also have of flaws or setback. So what is it that should be desirable? So one idea is what should be the desirable model of unity. That one idea is that yes, India has to stay together. We have stayed together for a long time, for a long time, and we have to stay together because ultimately it is with our unity. It is our unity which is something that the West looks up to. That look at India, it is so diverse a country, but they have been staying together forever. And the other question is, how does India maintain its unity with this diversity? Right. So, okay, the idea of uniformity is that people looking similar, people having common features, right? Similar features. For example, uniform in your police services, uniform in your school. So everyone looks similar. That is what uniformity is, the basic idea. We're not going into the technical details of the idea. Then unity is the feeling of oneness. Unity is more say more on the surface. Uniformity says that everyone looks similar, everyone follows the same norms, everyone marries the same way, etc. Then unity is the feeling of oneness, the feeling of integration, right? So both are different for that matter. So what, according to you, first can be the reasons of unity in diversity in India? What can be the reasons of unity in diversity in India? Okay, so the idea of tolerance, great. Or you can say our value system, Indian value system. Yes, so respect for each other, tolerance of each other. Indian constitution, great. What other things? Economic dependency on each other, great. Our various laws, yes. Constitutional provisions, great. Shared history. Okay, great. So you have a fair idea as to what are the various reasons for unity in this diversity in India, right? And we'll come to that. Another question is, what is more desirable? Whether uniformity is desirable or diversity as a model of unity is desirable. And that is something I would want you to keep in your mind. I would want you to think about it, that what is more desirable? What can be the flaws of both the models? One model is unity in diversity. Another model is unity in uniformity. So I would want you to keep this question in mind, and I've given you a similar practice question for that matter, but keep that question in mind so that you have fair arguments. Okay, so let's talk about various reasons for this unity in diversity in India. The first idea is geographical factors. Just think about it. You have Himalayas on the north and covering the east, so it forms a physical boundary. Similarly, you have sea on three sides. You have sea on three sides, because of which it is one geopolitical entity. It has remained one geopolitical entity because there was no, say, there was no interference because of sea on these three sides and because of your mountains, because of your Himalayas. So there was no interference from the Chinese side. And also, if you look at your western frontier, you find that you have Hindu Kush mountains there. And ultimately, it was the Indian subcontinent was supposed to be from Hindu Kush mountains till your southern part of the country. So it has been like one geopolitical entity which has stayed together, which is safe from all the sides. Another idea is your constitution, that post your independence, post 1947, we accepted the same constitution. Now, one constitution for every member of the country, and also are the provisions or the values that our constitution upholds. So think about, if our constitution said that the constitution will discriminate on the basis of your caste or color, on the basis of your sex, etc., then people might not have accepted. But our constitutional values of equality, our constitutional values of fraternity has been the most important reason for India being this one unit, India maintaining its unity. Then another idea is religious pilgrimage. So traditionally, now a lot of people do not go for it, but previously you'll find, particularly in Hindus, the older people would go out on a pilgrimage after they are done with their responsibilities. They have married their children, even their children had they had, say, grandchildren. Post that, they'll go on this religious pilgrimage, wherein they'll go to all the important Hindu shrines. So, if you talk about religious pilgrimage, you'll find that you have your Padrinath in the north, then you have your Dwarika in the west. Similarly, you have your Jagannath in the east, and then you have Rameshwaram in the south. So, with this pilgrimage, you find that uh, various important shrines or various important temples, people will travel across the length and breadth of the country. That is also another reason for this unity. Then the most important tradition of accommodation. So there have been various conflicts because of our diversity, because of our caste, etc. Yes, we see that a lot of castes have been historically deprived, but still we find that people have this feeling of tolerance and love for each other. People respect each other, for that matter. Yes, the social norms were so, because ultimately it is the social norms that will prevail. The social norms were so that a few castes or other religions were discriminated against. Similarly, if you look at today, yes, there is a little rise in intolerance. Yes, people are having this hatred for other religions, but again, it is something transient. It is something happening for time being because the society is accepting it now. But ultimately, and we wish so, that our traditional principles or values of tolerance and love will prevail over this hatred that is going on right now. So this tradition of accommodation, people coming from a different religion, they are being accommodated, they have been coexisting together, and not just that, people have been intermingling. India has been, if you know from history, been considered as a melting pot, that anyone coming from outside, anyone coming from anywhere is not just accommodated well, but also people intermingle. Then you have your caste system, and rather than caste system, you can think of the Varna classification. So this Varna, fourfold Varna classification is uniform across the country. So that is also one reason of people feeling connected, because you have Brahmins in the north, in the east, in the west, in the south. Similarly, people from individuals from other social groups or other caste Varna groups as well. And again, the tradition of interdependence. This can be particularly thought of in terms of your Jajmani system, wherein one caste was dependent on another caste or members of the other caste for their various services. So, for example, till today, the most of the other castes are dependent on Brahmins for their marriages and any rituals related to death. Then also, you'll find that even your interdependence with respect to your resources has also been another reason. So every region has its specific resources which are generally shared with other regions. So there are regions where you have, say, a lot of rice and wheat being grown. Then there are regions where you have a lot of other fruits that are being grown. And no society can possibly exist merely on the limited resources that they have. They would always need something else. They would always need a diversity on their plate, for example. So, because of this economic dependence as well, we have stayed together as one unit. Now, one question is, apart from these, can you suggest any kind of modern institution or any kind of modern feature which enhances this unity? Until then, I'll just look at the questions that you have posted. So, Devansh has been on point saying market as an institution. So, just think of your India as one market and uniform taxation across the country, right? That can also be another reason for the same. And Kaushik, your question will be addressed. Your question will be addressed with the question that we are going to discuss. So yes, technology has been playing an important role for keeping us together, because previously people would not have been aware. Apart from the ones who have been traveling, people would not be aware of the cultural practices of other people coming from other regions. So North Indians would not have been much aware of the cultural practices of South Indians. But now with technology, with rapid means of communication and transport, you find that people now get to know each other. Now people have more and more feeling like this. So for instance, you'll find similarities with respect to the language. Yes, we speak different language, different dialects, but a lot of those languages are coming from the same uh, uh, common language. They're coming from a common language, and because of which you'll find similarities in words. You'll find similarities in the way you address something or someone across the country. So yes, your technology has also played an important role in uniting us today. Great. So these are various reasons for this unity in our diversity in this country. Now, when we say that yes, we have diversity in our country, and that diversity does not necessarily lead, having diversity, does it necessarily mean that it will lead to conflict? Absolutely no. And we have various reasons to say that India has been maintaining its unity in this diversity. So why shouldn't we go for this model of unity in diversity rather than uniformity? And along with this, so this is one idea. Yes, when we talk about India, we would say that it is the model of unity and diversity that should be followed, but you have to tell the why of it. That why unity in diversity and why not unity in uniformity? Because one idea is that you can simply substantiate with various examples that even though we had diversity, we have maintained our unity, and you have examples like this. But another thing is, why not uniformity? Because uniformity can also lead to unity, for that matter. I can cite example from tribes. Just think about this. Why not? Why not uniformity in diversity? Why not unity in uniformity? Think that unity in uniformity is the best option and uniform civil code is the solution. So please suggest how. That is what the question is. The question is how. Yes, so Satoshi is saying that because of uniformity, people might lose their various cultural practices, etc., and which can be problematic. So yes, see, just think about this. Just think about this. If we say that uh, your religious diversity will lead to conflicts, think about these and think about various factors. See, if you think about religious diversity, if we say religious diversity will lead to conflicts, so one idea is the kind of diversity we have with respect to religion, we do not have as many examples of violent conflicts, for that matter. One. Second, think about the Western societies. Don't you think there is uh, they share the same religion? All of them have the same religion, but they had a lot of violent conflicts, so much so that it led to world wars. So uniformity might not necessarily lead to unity. Then think about this. Because of this uniformity, if we say that everyone has to be uniform, and because of this say imposition of uniformity, people feel that we are losing our culture, we are losing our various practices, we are losing our rituals. Wouldn't that lead to a lot of tensions within the society? Just think about, take example of imposition of Hindi across the length and breadth of the country, and you found that we had conflicts just because we try to maintain this uniformity, try to impose this uniformity. Because uniformity, if you look at it, it is imposed. Uniformity is imposed, whereas unity is something organic. Unity comes from within. So that's where you have to remember how you have to argue for either case. So we have given examples for both the cases, but it is ultimately up to you how you feel for it. Yes, so Sahil is saying that if we talk about uniformity, ultimately, just think about this. When we say democracy, in democracy, it is people who will elect their representatives, and these representatives will make laws. Now, the practice of voting, for example, the practice of electing your representatives is ultimately based in majority, is ultimately based in who will get the maximum votes. So don't you think if we try to maintain this uniformity, it will definitely be according to the majoritarian perspective? Just think about that. Need not say argue for either case, because we have finish the argument for that matter. But yes. So, Santosh, what is the benefit of having like-minded people? Don't you think we need to have people with diverse mindsets? Just think about your new national education policy, because at the same time, government is saying that our various outcomes with respect to education have not been proper, and to make it better, let's give people diverse inputs. Let students choose from a multiplicity of subjects. Let them not behave in a very mechanical and hence a robotic manner. Let them have an exposure of everything. Okay, so because see, the idea is we do not have to get our personal opinions when we are trying to address these questions. What we have to do is we have to try to be neutral. The we have to look at the arguments from both sides. Ultimately, yes, we cannot get over our socialization, because the way one has been socialized, the way various values have been imbibed in you, is something which might not even dilute if even if you give it 50 years, right? But let it not come between the your interaction with the subject and you being a civil servant, because ultimately it will work not just for your detriment, but for everyone's loss, right? It will become everyone's loss if you bring in your personal values, your limited values in practice. Okay, so this is the idea of the diversity that we have. How did we maintain this unity in diversity? Then also, what model is desirable, whether it is unity in diversity or unity in uniformity? And we have looked at both the arguments. We have looked the for and the against arguments. Now, there is this practice question for you, which is based in the discussion we just had. So, India needs a composite culture model rather than a uniformity model of unity. Discuss. So, one thing is the statement is biased towards this composite culture model, which can be thought of in terms of unity in diversity. When we talk about uniformity model, it is obviously unity in uniformity. The question asks you to give more weightage to this model compared to the other one. But how do you go about it? What has to be done is think of your introduction, body, and conclusion. So body has to be dedicated primarily to composite culture model. And how is it better? Right. So while doing that, one is you have to highlight the positives of this diversity or composite model. And the other thing is you have to highlight the negatives of uniformity model. Please make sure that you do not miss out on this part, because this is something that is generally missed while writing answers. We'll go on talking about the positives of the composite culture model, and we will forget about the negatives of this uniformity model, because if uniformity model has any flaws, it gives more weightage or more ground to your composite culture model. So one idea is this. So your body is complete. And in conclusion, you can highlight a few ways to maybe approach this composite culture model, or you can highlight the negatives of this composite culture model. So the better idea is to highlight the negatives briefly of composite culture model. Now, generally, you'll find that we say the conclusion has to end in suggestions and not on something negative. But what we are saying is the negatives of composite culture model being the shortcomings of composite culture model, and how it can be addressed. Right. So the shortcomings of composite culture model and how it can be addressed. So which will give an overall positive outlook to your answer. So I hope the body and conclusion is done and you can approach it. Now, can anyone suggest what kind of introduction we can give? What kind of introduction can we give to this question? Let's take your idea so that everyone gets to contribute. And the more you try to contribute, the better it is for everyone, including you, because you'll get to know about multiple ways to write an answer, and your answer would not be limited to a particular thing. Then should we write in a point-wise or paragraph-based manner? See, it is always dependent on the kind of question that is being asked. Now, this question can be approached in any manner you want. You can write the body in your introduction and conclusion is always going to be in a paragraph manner, but your body can, for this question, can be written in a point-wise or in a paragraph manner. So wherever you have multiple points, wherever you can lucidly mention various points, it is better to go in a point-wise manner. But if you feel that the in this particular question, I do not have a lot of content, and also it does not say give much space to this point-wise format, wherever there'll be comparison, for instance, there your pointers will look more like paragraphs, multiple paragraphs, right? So it is always based on question. You keep practicing multiple questions and it'll fall in place. You'll understand. And by the time we finish our discussion, right, the discussion on social issues and justice, you'll understand. So one idea is, try to explain both the models, and which is a good idea, because see, this is something that that they cannot assume you to know. And yes, obviously we know what is this model, what is the direction of this model, to try to explain it. Do not try to define it, because if you try to define it, you might not have a proper definition for the same. Try to explain it. Great. Talk about diversity in India. Great, because talking about this diversity in India will prepare the background for your body, that because of this diversity we need this composite culture model. Great. So a few of you have asked questions, like for example, Praveen, you have asked this question, addressed here. Yes, so introduction, diverse, great. Also, in preparing the background, you can talk about the historical perspective, because historically India has followed this composite culture model, right? Great. Great. So I think we have significant number of introductions that can this is something that we can address easily, right? Yes, you can talk about the principles enshrined in your constitution, which relates to preserving this diversity. So ultimately, Akansha, you are going to write about this unity and diversity here in the body, so it's better to stick to unity and diversity there in your body part. Yes, so now look at this question. We have already discussed the merits of both the models, for that matter, merits and demerits. The question is more biased towards composite culture model. So in the body, you address how is composite culture model better for India compared to uniformity model. In doing that, you have to highlight the positives of this composite culture model and also the negatives of uniformity model. In conclusion, you talk about what can be the shortcomings of this composite culture model and you address it, but it has to be done briefly. Look at the word limit, right? So it has to be done briefly. Then also in the introduction, you have multiple ways to start. So one is you explain briefly both these models. Then the second idea is talk about diversity in India, because it can become a prelude to or a basic background to your body part. Then the third idea is talk about the historical perspective, that how in India historically composite culture model has been practiced. Great. So this will be the structure of your answer, and I hope everyone is able to understand this. If you are not able to, the best way to go about it is, while revising, just during revision, just give it sufficient time. Just try to absorb the question, what the question is trying to say, what the question is trying to ask, and with time you'll get a hang of it. And I hope by the time we have, I guess, discussed 2-3 questions, and now you know that how to conceptualize a question, how to break it down and try to write your answers. And we are going to continue this practice till the last class, so that you know how you can approach these questions. Now, with this, we conclude our discussion on salient features of the Indian society and unity in diversity in India. The next point of discussion for us is the effects of globalization on Indian society. And the second part, we will take up urbanization. We'll first start with effects of globalization on Indian society. In this part, we have to understand what is globalization. We have to understand what is globalization, what are the features of globalization, what were the causes or reasons for spread of globalization, and then we move quickly to effects of globalization on our Indian society, because this is the important part. And then we'll look at questions as well. Now, before we start, just look at a couple of questions. So one question is, are we losing our local identity for the global identity? Discuss. So it basically talks about the impact of globalization on Indian culture, right? So your local identity is related to your culture. So are we losing our local identity for global identity? Then there was a question which asked about the impact of globalization on women, a section of our society. Then another question asked about impact of globalization on elderly, again a section of our society. So one thing is clear, that when we look at the kind of questions that they have asked and the basic instruction in the syllabus, the basic instruction in the syllabus says effects of globalization on Indian society, on Indian society. So one idea is that we'll try to limit our discussion to society. Second thing is, we have to look at impact of globalization on each and every section in our country, because they ask section specific questions. Also, they can ask institution specific questions. Institutions in the sense, your institutions like caste system, your institution like your family, marriage, etc. So we have to primarily discuss in the on these lines. So your understanding from the previous chapter, wherein whenever we had to look at a change, any kind of change that is happening, we take up various features and we see what has changed in these features. Also, if you look at these questions and the general understanding of the topic, you always have to approach with both the dimensions. So what is the positive impact of globalization on women? What is the negative impact of globalization on women? Also, when it comes to institutions, we say that whatever change has happened, whether it has a positive impact or negative impact. So everywhere we will lead with this. We will lead with this approach of looking into both positive and negative. With this, let's start our discussion on what is globalization, what are its features, and hence its effects. Now look at these few articles from the newspapers. 100 days of Russia-Ukraine war, how India has been affected. So Russia and Ukraine war is happening thousands of kilometers away. And the article is talking about how it has impacted India. Similarly, Joe Biden being elected as the president in the United States, They're talking about how it may impact Indian economy. So it reflects on something, that the globally we are connected, even though we might be kilometers away, but we are connected. Similarly, if you look at these chains, and this is something that I think at least everyone would be aware of, Domino's Pizza. The Domino's Pizza, American company, serving Italian food in India. Similarly, if you look at Nando's, a brand from your South Africa, and they're serving here in India. Costa Coffee, UK, serving in India. Similarly, Indian food being offered in various countries. Little India in Europe, Chai Pani in USA, and something from very recent from the news. So these two Indian restaurants, Press Ind and Gagan Anand, were were they made it to the top restaurants of the world list. These two Indian restaurants, and if you look at it, ironically, none of the restaurant is based in India. So Trescent serves in Dubai. So Indian food being served in Dubai, making Indian food popular across the globe, making it to the top list of restaurants. Right? Yes, there can be other ideas as well, like KFC, and it's McDonald's, not McDowell's. So maybe yes, out of habit it happens. It's okay. Okay, so we see that Indian food being served in other countries and international food being served here in India. Similarly, you find with respect to various products, with respect to your food, clothes, media, sports, technology, pharmaceuticals, everything, you find that you have presence of international companies, international products and services in India. Similarly, think about the companies people work for. Think about the technology we are using right now. A lot of its components might be based in some other country, right? The cell phone you might be using, the cell phone you're using, or the laptop you're using might be made in the United States or China or some other country. So what kind of feeling does it give you? You think that the entire world is connected. Whatever is happening in India finds a mention everywhere. So your Manipur protests, you find a mention of Manipur violence in multiple newspapers, some based in the US, in UK. Similarly, if this COVID that happened, just think of COVID. Now, COVID gives you a complete understanding of globalization, for that matter. Now, originated in one place, a disease traveled across the globe, because of which you find that the entire globe, or all the countries across the globe, were shut down. And also you find that all the countries came together to cooperate and collaborate to create this vaccine for this COVID. And when all the countries were shut down, because for various raw materials, for your particularly your active pharmaceutical ingredients, most of the countries are dependent on China, including us. So in the lack of this transportation, because the supply chains were broken down, there was a crunch of medicines. Availability of medicines took a hit across the globe. So find that the entire world is interconnected now. Our markets are integrated, and we are a lot dependent on each other. And this idea of globalization says, not just in terms of your economy, but globalization is a socio-economic and political process that will come to how is it that process that brings your people, markets, goods, services, culture, idea, technology, and capital closer to each other, and increases interaction between them. So if you try to think about globalization, you'll find that it is not just economies, it is not just governments, but people who are coming closer as well. Now you can speak to anyone sitting in any part of the world over the phone, over the internet. Also, you can migrate to any other country which permits immigration. So you can migrate to any other country for work. And a lot more people are going out of work for taking up their higher education, for better healthcare facilities, for a better standard of living. People are traveling, are migrating from one place to another. Similarly, our ideas, how our ideas have been shaped because of this global interaction. So think of your movement for homosexuals, or think of decriminalizing your uh, homosexuality. Now it finds origin elsewhere. The protests did not initially, the ideas did not initially originate in India. They're coming from elsewhere. Similarly, you talk about Me Too movement. It started in one place and it traveled across the globe. So we have various ideas that are passed on. The idea of equality, liberty, where is it coming from? French Revolution. But now it is prevalent across the globe. Every constitution, written or unwritten, more or less follows this principle. Now, this globalization says globalization is basically a social, economic, and political process that brings all these ideas, people, markets, goods, capital together. This globalization envisages a borderless world. Now you see that your boundaries do not matter. And with a push towards globalization, you see that the world is shrinking. Shrinking in the sense that everything is now a click away or a flight away. Right? So every country, every idea has impact on each other now. Now, what we'll do is we'll try to understand globalization, various features of it. Do not have to limit ourselves to this definition. We'll look at various features and how it has been changing. But before that, try to address this question. Is globalization a modern process? Is globalization this coming together of people, markets, countries, economies together? Is it a modern process, or is it something that we find happening for a long time now? Yes, Sharmila, right observation. Sahil, yes. And we'll come to that westernization part. Do not worry. Yes, it has been there, and you can look at it as a historical process. You can look at it as a historical process. And you are giving examples now. The examples of your Silk Route, the examples of trading with the Europeans, the examples of various travelers coming to India during medieval and ancient and medieval times, the penetration of Britishers in India, right? Yes, so ancient trade, etc. So yes, you say that this coming together of people, this coming closer of our markets, etc., is not a new process, is not a modern process. We find it prevalent for a long, long time. We have examples from our ancient history, and this is one view with regards to globalization being a modern process. The other idea is that no, it is primarily a modern process. The other idea says that it is primarily a modern process, wherein you find that post your World War II, with your various international organizations coming up, with your definite push towards science and technology, your information and communication technology, with means of communication getting better, you find that globalization took the shape that it is in today. That globalization would not have been possible if not for science and technology, if not for advancements in means of communication and transport. So the other idea says that it is primarily a modern process that took shape after your World War II with your international organizations. And if you see, even in case of India, you can think of LPG reforms. Now, your international monetary fund was behind it. They were the ones who were pushing the idea of liberalization and globalization across the globe. So the other idea is it can be thought of as a modern process. Now let's look at the process that globalization is. So you can just go through these two slides. They mention very thing. Okay, so let's try to understand what globalization is, what are its various features. Now, globalization is a process of interaction, integration, and interdependence. Just look at these words with examples. Interaction can be between people, interaction of various markets, right? So, interaction is getting to know each other for that matter. Then the idea can be integration. Take example, and let's take examples from the market. Let's take example from the market. Now you see that you can sell your product anywhere in the world. You can use various services. You can get any product shipped from any part of the world here in India. That shows integration of our markets. Another thing is something happens in one market, the Lehman Brothers crisis in the 2008. Now that crisis that happened in one place impacted the entire world, impacted all the countries, all the economies. Similarly, take example of COVID, something happening in one place impacting the entire world, which shows that the market or the entire ecosystem is integrated. Similarly, think in terms of interdependence. Now we are dependent for our various raw materials on various countries, on other countries. We're dependent for various services on other countries. For example, the services of Zoom, one company that a lot of countries are dependent on. Similarly, think of the world dependent on India for their service needs. You find these BPOs, KPOs in a country. That is what basically dependence on India for various services. In turn, India is also dependent on them. Why? Because we need foreign investment. We need employment generation in our country. And that's why we are also dependent on them. So this interaction, integration, and interdependence is happening among people, companies, and governments. So companies you can easily understand, people you can easily understand. But think about governments as well. Governments are again now dependent on each other, not just for their economic needs, but think about security needs. Think about various regional groupings. Think about international organizations. Similarly, not just security, think in terms of policies. Now, even our policies are not independent of other countries, of our international organizations. The amount of subsidy that India can give to its farmers is limited by your international organizations. So there is a lot of interaction, integration, and interdependence with respect to all these. Yes. Then you think of it as a multifaceted process, that it is not just working in one dimension. It is not just economy that is getting affected. Think about our culture. Think about the language we're speaking right now. Think about the clothes we are wearing. Also, you think of the technology that we use. Think of the political ideas that we have, which have been traveling across the globe for that matter. So it is a multifaceted process. And you remember this when we look at impact of globalization, because it touches upon every aspect of our lives, we are going to look at everything. But here you have to remember that it is primarily your socio-cultural aspect on which we have to focus, because that is what is expected from us in this syllabus, in this chapter, because you read globalization in economics as well. So it's not because it is a multi-dimensional, multifaceted process. We're definitely going to take up economic factors, but ultimately we are going to limit our discussion to various socio-cultural effects or impacts of globalization. Then just let me start with the historical idea once, so that you understand the economic perspective. Just think of various travelers or various trade routes that were available in your ancient times. Think about various travelers coming to India. Now, what was the basic reason? So your Arab traders, for that matter, they were coming to India. What was the reason? The reason was trade. The reason was business. The reason was profit, right? So the basic thing is the the base of globalization is prepared by this concept of profit. That for the sake of profit, people started traveling from one place to another, and it was people. It was the movement of only people and people which was there in the past, because it is only with the movement of people that your ideas will start flowing. So that's why we say the globalization that we talk about today, this multifaceted process, was not there in the past, because it was generally the movement of people, and it was much later than with people various ideas, etc., started traveling. People are getting a glimpse of it, but again the process was not as fast. To travel from one part of the world to another, it took months altogether. And you would have heard of a lot of failed voyages, for that matter. So the basic idea behind this is generating profit. Now, to generate profit, think about this. This is coming from economy, and you must be aware. To generate profit, you would need favorable policies. So if you want to travel from one part of the world to another, what was the first thing they used to do? They used to approach the local court, the king, and they used to ask whether we can trade here or not. And with the permission of the king, they were let, they were allowed to trade in the country. They were allowed to buy spices, right, and go away. So another thing is, to generate this profit, you'll need favorable policies. Now think of this: if a person gets favorable policies, generates a lot of profit, but if their government says that you cannot hold private property, that you cannot hold this profit, you cannot have this profit, the profit that you have generated should go back to the society. So if they're not allowed to have property, then again the purpose of generating profit is left behind. So even if we talk in terms of our East India Company, you see that there were limitations on the officials of the East India Company. And what happened with time? That they became corrupt. They started doing it on their own, right? So the basic idea behind globalization can be linked to profit, that people wanted to get profit out of it. Yes, there were various travelers who did it for the sake of, say, understanding other societies. Yes, but the primary idea was profit. That's where it started. Just think of Google setting up their office in India. What is it for? Generating profit. Think of you traveling abroad. Why do you want to do that? Monetary gains, better standard of living. So similarly, if you look at the entire idea, it is centered around profit. The idea of globalization is centered around profit. Now, to generate this profit, you'll need favorable policies. And with this, if you are not allowed to keep this profit with yourself, you would not do that. Why would someone travel all the way to another part of the world, take a voyage of 6-8 months, and then not be allowed to hold private property? So the idea is centered around these three things. And these are the basic elements of globalization. So before coming to other parts, let me talk about various elements of globalization. So first idea is that of privatization. Then you have capitalism and liberalization. Liberalization, easily understood, is opening up of economies, wherein various countries relax their laws for investment, for goods and services to come and go. So liberalizing trade, opening up economies, right? Then capitalism is centered around the idea of a person can hold private property, a person or any business generally works for profit. And ultimately, if you want to generate profit, the demand and supply thing has to be left to the market. So market orientation. So if these elements are not there, if these elements are not there, do you think globalization would happen? And the answer is no. And also, if you look at these elements, there is a cause and effect relationship. So this profit is the idea behind globalization, and with globalization, you can increase profit. Similarly, if we talk about privatization, privatization is basically holding of business by private individuals, removing the role of state. And if you look previously, what used to happen was the states or the governments will get involved in business, and they will do it primarily for the sake of public service. And it was not profit that was the central idea, but it was public service, which around which the entire idea of government getting into business was centered. Now these governments will decide the norms, they will fix values. Yes, individuals or privates were allowed to set up businesses, but there was a limitation. The government used to suggest the ceiling of the products and the services. It was according to the government that it will happen. But then slowly, a lot many private players started coming up in various businesses, and also the government started giving more and more way to this market, that let market decide the prices, because that is what the market does best. So market, for that matter, market orientation is is considered to be one of the best ways to organize your economies, that it should work on the principle of demand and supply that is determined by the market. Because otherwise, people would not have any incentive to say produce more, to be more productive, to work. So think about this, just related to the idea of joint family. So in joint family, there can be people, and we had mentioned this, that there can be someone who will become very complacent, who would not want to work, who would not want to do anything, would not want to take up any economic activity. Why? Because they know their basic needs will be taken care of, their economic security will be taken care of. And this is again uh, the considered to be one of the best argument against communism, wherein they say that if it is about joint ownership, why would people put in efforts? And we will answer this question by the end of our discussion when we reach self-help groups. So but understand this, that if there is no profit involved, people would not want to put in any efforts for that matter. So that's why we say that capitalism is one of the core elements of globalization. So capitalism says that a person can hold private property, a person can generate profit, and to generate this profit, the economy has to be dependent on market. So market orientation, privatization, and profit making are the basic crux of capitalism. And when we talk about other elements of globalization, you find industrialization here. So with increase in industrialization, you find a definite push towards globalization. How? To set up an industry somewhere, say local manufacturer has set up an industry here in India. Now they would need a market to sell their product. They'll need their raw material coming from somewhere. They might need investments from some other place. Then they'll need skilled manpower, right? So that will give push to globalization. Think of your East India Company, or think of your post-industrial England. Think of your post-industrial England. Now, why did they go around the world taking colonies or making colonies? The idea was to expand their market. They needed more because now industrialization was on the peak. A lot of surplus is being generated, but where are the markets? Where do you sell this product? And that was the reason. they started going out. And initially it was various companies that started going out, and then later what happened, right? And also they took a lot of Africans, a lot of Asians to their own country. Why? To make them labor, because they needed workers for that matter. Also, if you remember, they needed cotton from both Americas and India. That is their raw material. So for their market, for their raw material, for their labor, they will need new markets, new avenues. And hence you see that industrialization gives a definite push to globalization, because even in today's world, a company needs investment from various foreign investors. And if you look at it, your SoftBank, your Facebook, they are the say the biggest investors across the globe, and they invest in each and every country. They invest in a lot of companies. So globalization for the sake of investment. Similarly, globalization for the sake of market. Indian cars being manufactured here, being sold in international markets. The examples are few, but think of international cars being manufactured somewhere and sold in Indian market. Laptops, mobile phones, etc. So with industrialization, you find an increase in globalization, and industrialization is an important element, because before we became a service based society, we were an industrial society, and the globalization was picking up pace during industrialization. So now you can see that it is more biased towards services than industrialization. But yes, one of the core elements has been industrialization. And also this industrialization also leads to globalization. So cause and effect relationship, and I hope you have understood this. Then your international relations. Now for this international trade to happen, for global trade to happen, countries have to open channels with other countries. If you want to sell a product, or if you want any kind of services from some other country, the governments have to first open up channels, and they have to maintain formal international relations with those countries. So again, another important element of globalization is international relations. So it need not be only bilateral between two countries, it can be with your international organizations, it can be your various regional organizations, right? So it need not always be bilateral, but yes, international relations are also essential for the spread of globalization. Yes, so masala bonds is a good example for that matter. Yes, so now you see that there is a definite push of your multinational companies towards newer markets, toward more populous markets. So India being a highly populated country, and also the levels of awareness of people being low, these become reasons for your multinational companies to expand. Because you think about the reception of Facebook, Instagram, and various other social media in India. Why? Because one, the population is huge, the numbers itself play the role, play the most important role. And the other thing is, people tend to get addicted for some reason, right? So it can be related to low levels of education in the country. So they become an easy market for that matter. Now, coming to the understanding of globalization, coming back to it, you see market liberalization is one feature, that you have to liberalize your markets to have this interaction, this interdependence between various countries and economies. Again, market oriented approach is coming straight from the idea of capitalism. That one of the essential requirement of globalization is market oriented approach. If the company, if the countries or the government start putting up ceiling on prices, start putting up ceiling on profits, it would not work out. Companies would not want to establish their business in other countries. Then it is generally driven by international trade and investment. So international trade, Indians selling or Indian companies selling their products and services abroad, international trade. And investment is sitting here in a country, you can invest in any other financial market. You just gave an example of masala bonds for that matter. Similarly, you find that if in today's world we see that now it is less and less of production. If you look at global GDP, think of the global GDP. If you look at it, you'll find the maximum component or the major components of the international GDP are generally trade, and trade that too of services, and also investment. It reflects, you find it gives you a reflection of how we have moved towards a service based society, how we are moving away from industrialization, right? So the phase of industrialization is not, it's not that it's done and it's on a decline. No, it has been consistently rising. The reason being, your growth of population, so you need more and more products, right? But ultimately it is the service sector, it is the investment which contributes most to the global GDP. So this is driven by international trade and aided by information technology. Now come to this idea. Think of olden times where it used to take days to travel from one place to another. Now you can do it, you can reach Dubai within 3 hours from India. And also you'll find that, if you talk about a few countries, you'll find that the domestic flights are longer compared to those international flights for that matter. Also, if you want to invest in a company, you can do it using your laptop, using your cell phone. If you want to invest in crypto, and I believe a few of you might be doing it, you can do it simply sitting on your cell phone. If you want to connect with anyone, if you want to give an interview to a company, you can do it simply. So you see that this uh, penetration of information technology and the growth in information technology has one sped up this process of globalization. And also, if we say that making profit is at the heart of it, information technology is the vehicle that globalization uses. Because without information technology, without your scientific advancement, globalization would not have been possible. So we see that when we look at globalization, we primarily understand it as an economic process which is aided by information technology. But it is not limited to this. Yes, we can say that it is economics, it is profit making which drives globalization. And ultimately, information technology is the vehicle which is being used by globalization, but it is not limited to this. It has a wider scope. And you'll understand that once we start looking at impacts of globalization on various dimensions. And I believe that with the basic introduction, you are already getting a fair idea as to how globalization is taking place. Okay, so let's take a break now, and post our discussion. So we were talking about various features of globalization, and with that we looked into the basic elements of globalization as well. Let's talk about other ideas. So one idea is that it is an ongoing process. And now you can see that we looked at globalization as a historical process which has been going on, speeding up after the rise of, or maybe after significant means of communication and technology came up. So yes, it is an ongoing process because we see that this interdependence, this interaction, this integration is happening more and more. And we see that yes, there are a few hiccups at times wherein it gets reversed, but again picks up the speed back to where it was. So for example, during COVID, you find that yes, there were restrictions on travel, there were restrictions with respect to markets. You could not have got anything or any services apart from online services. You could not have got anything from any place. But yes, there was a small hiccup, but otherwise it goes on. It goes on increasing over the years. It leads to deterritorialization. That means the borders now do not matter. Any national territory, international territory would not matter at all. The distance does not matter. Anything happening in the country finds a mention in the international media within 5 minutes. You can get anything that you want from any place in the world. Similarly, you can sitting here, you can use Skype to talk to a friend or a cousin or your family members sitting in some other country. So that means globalization has also led to deterritorialization, wherein the boundaries do not matter so much. Now, with these basic ideas about globalization, and these ideas also contained the reasons behind the spread, wherein we talk about trade and economic opportunities being central to the idea of globalization. Because even today, if you want to say uh, travel even for education, the basic idea is with better education will come better remuneration. So the basic idea, the heart and soul of globalization, is your profit, is your economic activities. Then the most important vehicle, technology. With spread of technology, with increase in technology, you find the increasing rate of globalization. Then various economic events across the globe can also have also been responsible for globalization. Apart from COVID, can anyone suggest any other kind of economic event that led to this spread of globalization? Any other economic event for that matter? 2008 crisis, yes. BOP crisis, yes. So you find any kind of economic event taking place leads to this globalization. Because see, initially people might not be able to, but ultimately the cooperation with respect to these crises, with respect to these events, ultimately lead to globalization. Yes, so your LPG reforms that happened across the globe, it was because of the crisis, but ultimately led to an increase in globalization. Great. Then also you find that post 9/11, post the terrorist attack on the World Trade Centers in the US, you find that there has been increased cooperation on terrorism. This has also led to globalization, because before that, when India used to say that we are being affected by terrorism, no one used to take us seriously. But post 9/11, you find that a lot of countries are cooperating, collaborating to tackle this menace of terrorism. Then you have global cooperation on environmental issues as well. Think about the problems with respect to climate change. Think about your various COPs. So these also have been responsible for the spread of globalization. Great. So the examples that you are writing are right in place. Okay. So we have already looked at various elements of globalization, and these elements of globalization also have a cause and effect relationship with globalization. So without the idea of, say, profit orientation, or without the idea of capitalism, globalization would have happened, but not at the pace that we see today, because companies would not have got any incentive for that matter to open up new to move to new places or invest in other countries, if not for the sake of profit and private property. Now what we have to do is we have to come to the central part of our discussion, that is the impact of globalization. Now we have to look at this impact of globalization, particularly on Indian society. But even if we look at Indian society, you'll find there are various dimensions. So one is basically your social dimension, but also your Indian political structure, political system, then our economic system, which by this time you would have understood completely, because our discussion has been in that direction. Then think about the impact on our environment. So this idea of globalization would assume you to have a basic understanding of various topics from other subjects as well, because we cannot go on, say, mentioning about a lot of environmental conferences here. So I would assume that you have read environment, and if not, you can maybe relate it later. So these are the dimensions in which we have to see the impact of globalization. But before that, you have to understand the levels of impact. So, for example, if whenever the way uh, Newton puts it, every action will have an equal and opposite reaction. Fine. But if we talk in our case, yes, there will be an opposite reaction. So if something is happening, it will have an impact, direct impact on on that thing, but also find an opposite reaction to it. But what about the positive impacts? It can be on various levels. Negative reaction is one. If we talk about globalization, yes, there can be backlash to this globalization, to these forces of change. But the impact of globalization has various levels. So, for example, because of the impact of globalization, at times we just forget about our own ideas, we just forget about our own culture and stick to what has been introduced to us. Then also at times we mix everything. We take a little from that culture and we retain something from our culture. Then also at times we can be indifferent to it as well. So there can be various levels of impact when any force of change, for that matter, impacts any society. It is not just limited to globalization, but also can be extended to other forces like modernization, westernization, right? So what we will do is we will look at various levels of impact, which will be helpful for you to understand the impact on Indian society. The political impact, social impact, and uh, your environmental impact are going to be fairly simple, unidirectional. But when it comes to the impact on Indian society, you would have to think in terms of these levels of impact. Okay, so with globalization, you find that one idea is there can be a complete backlash. Think of this: with globalization, introduction of new festivals in our country, backlash against them. Think of Valentine's Day. Think of uh, uh, think of your Halloween, Christmas. Similarly, not just festivals, think of backlash against the imposition of foreign language. Think of more and more push towards the local. Now, yes, even think of Make in India for that matter. On the level of government, think of Make in India. Now, because of foreign competition, because of various other factors, because our industries are not going, we find a push towards Make in India. What is that? A backlash against globalization, a backlash against the integration, the interaction that is happening. So one idea can be backlash, which can be an opposite reaction or a reaction for that matter to globalization. Then another idea is complete submission. Apart from our clothing, please try to suggest any other way in which we have completely submitted to the forces of globalization. So if you look at our clothing, we say that the traditional way of wearing clothes in India has been lost. And particularly the male members, they generally wear, and they have completely say accepted, or they have been completely undertaken by this global clothing pattern, clothing style, right? Complete submission, yes. So language to a great extent in urban areas can also be seen as a form of complete submission. Now, see, other ideas like eating habits. Eating habits cannot completely be said to have been a part of complete submission, because it is again limited, right? It is again limited. If you stay at home, yes, you might go out and eat at times. You can try various cuisines, but generally we tend to eat at home and maintain the same diet. Yes, so democracy, great. So Sahil has mentioned democracy. Think about democracy. In India, where it was complete monarchy, has been completely subsumed by democracy. We have become a democratic country. Great. So similarly, you find that you can completely submit to a particular force. Also, you'll find acceptance and coexistence. A simple idea, you go eat pizza, but you have homemade food as well. Similarly, uh, say women, they wear sari and they wear other clothes as well. So they have accepted, or rather, you can think in terms of your language. So English is there, people are speaking English, speaking their traditional language or their mother tongue at home. So there has been acceptance and coexistence. And also, there is another part which talks about amalgamation. Amalgamation is borrowing a few traits from other cultures, adding a few traits of our own culture, and creating something new. Amalgamation is borrowing a few features of something, having or adding a few features of something that is our own, and creating something new. Think about your languages. Think about English for that matter. Or think about any language interacting with an Indian language. Persian and Hindi created Urdu. Not just this, you think about the way we dress during our weddings, Indo-Western suits, which depicts an amalgamation of various features of global forces or global cultures and our own culture. We will come to that, Himanshu. We will come to that. See, integration, you have to understand, integration is different. It's happening on an economic level. And when we are talking about these levels of impact, they'll be limited to your social impact. And that's why the idea is being transferred through socio-cultural uh, examples. This we have to look at on a social level. And otherwise as well, even if you want to think in terms of various economic practices, you can find examples for that matter. Brexit can be what? An example of backlash against globalization. Similarly, this mixed form of economy can be another example of amalgamation. We borrowed a few features of one form, a few features of our own. So we were following more or less a socialist pattern, then we adopted a few features of capitalism. So again, that is what amalgamation. So you can find examples, but here we have to limit our understanding to Indian society. And this will come in handy when we try to understand the impact of globalization on Indian society. It's great. Now, when we talk about impact of globalization on Indian society, apart from all the dimensions that we have mentioned, political, economic, and environmental, that we will go through quickly, what we have to do is we have to think about various features of Indian society. So the first thing is we always classify Indian society in urban Indian society, rural Indian society, and tribal society. So what we have to see is what has been impact on urban society, what has been impact on rural society, what has been impact on tribal society. How do you do that? You break them down in features, and you look at the impact on each and every feature. Then also, if we talk about Indian society, we have various social institutions like the institution of family, the institution of marriage. What else? Caste system. So we will look at the impact of globalization on various institutions. Apart from these various institutions, we have various social groups. We have women, we have children, elderly, minorities, scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Then you have workers in both your organized and unorganized sector. So what we will do is we will take up a few of these institutions and a few of these your sections of the society. I'll tell you how to break them down and approach, and you have to do the rest as your homework. And if you're not able to understand, you can ask a question tomorrow. Okay, so let's start with various dimensions of impact of globalization on Indian society. And we see that I don't think we have to explain that how globalization has impacted all these dimensions, starting with your economic impact. If you remember, when talking about liberalization, privatization, we were saying that globalization has a cause and effect relationship. That liberalization is an essential feature of globalization, and also globalization leads to more and more liberalization. So understand that as a cause and effect relationship. Now, what we have to do is, if we talk about liberalization or one of the feature of globalization, we have to think both in terms of positive and negative impacts. We have to think in terms of both positive and negative impacts. Niranjan, you are saying education system. See, the thing is, education system one will be covered there, education and healthcare. I've given them specific heads. And also, when we're talking about liberalization, we're talking about economic liberalization. We're not talking in terms of the political idea of being liberal or the classical or neoliberalism. We are not going there. We are limiting our understanding to economic liberalization. That is opening up of economies. Now think about this. If we talk about liberalization, we have opened up our economy to various other countries. Now companies can conduct business here. If companies can conduct business here, don't you think you have more choice of products? Choice, that too, of better quality. Then also, investment in your various businesses is not a problem now, because now you do not just need domestic capital, you can borrow or you can have investors from anywhere. Yes, this has led to setting up of new industries, and hence created a lot of new employment. Great. You get introduced to newer technology, so the idea of innovation, technology. Now because of these multiple products, because of this choice of product, now various companies compete with each other, and they have to, with this competition, they have to decrease the price, or to stay competitive, they have to keep the price lower than the other, or at least equivalent to other, which leads to cheaper products and services available to the consumers. Yes, so it has led to growth in GDP. It has given a boost to our research and development. Great. So we are not going towards authority structure, etc. We are talking in terms of liberalization of trade, liberalization of investment, liberalization of our economy. Now, this can be attributed to this can be understood as positive impact of liberalization. Yes, creation of new infrastructure, etc. Now, what can be the negative impact of liberalization? Now, with liberalization, you find that there is increased competition, which can be positive in the sense that you get cheaper products. But with this increased competition, think about your local manufacturers. What happens to them? Would they be able to compete with these companies? Absolutely no. Then think about, yes, exploitation of resources, and exploitation of not just resources, not just physical resources, natural resources, but your human resources as well. Because these companies, we said that profit is at the heart of globalization. These companies would want to extract maximum profit out of our market, and to maximize profit, what you have to do is you have to decrease the cost of product and have more and more margin. Now your raw material would more or less remain the same for every company. The availability of raw material, the prices of raw material would remain more or less same. And where you can target is the cost of labor, the cost of processing, because these setting up of an industry, buying your machinery, etc., the cost is same. All you can do is you can reduce on labor cost. Again, yes, exploitation of workers, impact on environment in the form of exploitation of our natural resources. Then our local industries are not able to compete with these international companies. Then with their investment, just think about this. If a company from abroad is investing in India, wouldn't they want our policies to be favorable to them? Wouldn't they ask our government to make favorable policies for them so that they can set up? And you see that whenever there is an international company coming in India, we try to make the conditions favorable for them so that they can extract maximum profit out of it. The benefit for the government is, yes, they'll get investment, they'll get international company here, they'll get more in revenues, right? Yes, so it will lead to crony capitalism. It can lead to crony capitalism. And similarly, if you look at this idea of liberalization, it can pretty much answer all the other dimensions as well. It can pretty much answer all the dimensions as well. Now, with liberalization, one is incoming, the other idea is outgoing. In terms of outgoing, think of our software engineers and the good doctors leaving for other countries in search of better opportunities. So that can also happen. So migration, because of liberalization, and this liberalization can make other companies come here, set up their business here, and Indian companies also go abroad and set up their industries there, right? So when you talk about liberalization, you have to think both in terms of positive and negative. Now, why did I expand this? Because you would find all these dimensions covered here. Why did I expand this? So that you understand, when there is one element, when there are related kind of say processes, say liberalization and globalization, even though they are different, but when you approach them, they look similar. So for example, when we are saying that modernization, impact of modernization on Indian society or on Indian family, now you can think, you can relate globalization with modernization, and you would find that even globalization is having a similar kind of impact, apart from a few exceptions. So when we talk about marriage, apart from think of this idea that now you have more you have better choices of or you have more choices, more in number, more choices of spouse selection. Now you can get married to someone who lives in another country, for example, but most of them will remain the same. Yes, so some are laughing because is it a dream, and that too far-fetched? That is a question that you need to ask yourself. So okay, so why did I do this? So that you understand these forces of change have a lot in common. These forces of change aid each other, and when you try to look at the impact of these forces, what you can do is you can apply the same kind of logic. Apart from a few other things, more or less everything will remain the same. So in paper, if you find the impact, you do not have to say think that why did they ask like what do I write when they say impact of globalization on tribal society or impact of globalization on rural society. Just think about liberalization, privatization, industrialization being the elements of globalization, and how would these elements impact your rural society, right? So this exercise was done just for the sake of that. Now think of privatization. With globalization, you have increasing privatization, and this privatization will have various impacts on the society. So understand privatization as an impact of globalization first. When when a few countries started letting privatization happen, started letting more and more private players come up, started moving towards market oriented approach, and people from other countries would see, and even other governments would see, that look at the US, how they have been growing. They have been making far great development with respect to their revenues, with respect to their uh, per capita income, with respect to the levels of development, and it would create that the glitter in other minds. The way people from rural areas, previously at least, used to look at urban areas, that once a person moves to an urban area, it is going to be a beautiful life. You have electricity there, you have skyscrapers there, etc., etc. It is only a few years later when they realize that it is not all rainbow and sunshine. It is a lot different than what they imagined, right? So with privatization, you find there, with globalization, find privatization was also taking place, and privatization in turn led to globalization. This has already been discussed, but now just look at the positive and negatives of it. I'm not going to write here because you can simply understand this. So with privatization, you'll find that government, a lot of responsibility, other responsibilities of the government are being taken care of by the private sector. So, for example, previously government would invest in companies for the sake of public service, but your private players will do it for profit making, will do it to maximize profit. Similarly, with privatization, you find that one positive idea is that the government can now take care of other things. Now, the government need not to be invested in a business, and they can maybe work on other things. And also with privatization, you find that with the profit orientation of the businesses, you find the government revenues have been increasing consistently. But there are negative impacts as well. That with privatization is ultimately going to lead to exploitation of the workers. Privatization is ultimately going to lead to the higher prices. Think of your privatized education sector. Think of your privatized healthcare system. You find the prices are so that a lot of people get excluded from those from taking those services. And this is this idea. It is this idea of privatization, which can also be linked to inequality, which can also be linked to discrimination. This privatization, because of privatization, the prices are so high that a lot of people are discriminated against, because now they cannot get that service. Similarly, with globalization, has been there has been a growth in the number of MNCs. Now these MNCs have created a lot of employment for us. These MNCs contribute greatly to government revenues. These MNCs offer a plethora of choice when it comes to various products and services. These MNCs bring investment in the country as well, which ultimately translates into capital formation, infrastructure, better human resources. But also, if you look at these MNCs, you find issues like crony capitalism. You find you find issues like people like with MNCs, with the growth of MNCs, you find that there is an increase in the role of technology. On one side, we say that MNCs have led to the growth of employment, have led to increase in employment opportunities, but at the same time, these MNCs work on advanced technologies, and they adopt these technologies very soon, very easily, because of which we lose a lot of our jobs. Similarly, these MNCs, they employ only a limited section of our people. they employ only skilled labor. Most of the MNCs employ only skilled labor. Now, again, they discriminate against your unorganized sector. And again, the idea is just relate this idea, because we are going to discuss these things with poverty, but just try to understand this. And I'll check whether you remember this idea or not. Now, if we give more and more purchasing power to one section of the society, think about your service, people employed in service sector. With the growth in MNCs, you find economic betterment of this section. At the same time, there is another section which is not gaining anything, right? Which has seen no betterment in their economic status over the years. And think of a product, any kind of product. And if there is a product, think of it as a basic service. Think of any food item. Now, this product is being demanded by both these sections. Now, this section has the purchasing power, because of which they'll create demand for the product. Because of the rise in demand, the prices will increase. Ultimately, inflation will take place. And if the prices increase, this section, which has few economic resources, which has finite economic resources, is disadvantaged compared to this section. And when we say that, if you try to understand this, when we say that the urbanization in India has been led by your growth of service sector and not your industrial sector, you find that this is the problem which happens, that one section gets disadvantaged because of, say, limited scope of service sector, because the service sector will work only on a few services. The service sector will work for the betterment of only a particular sector. But ultimately, the other idea is, if the service sector is growing, they'll contribute more and more to the GDP. If the government has more resources, they will ultimately invest it for the betterment of people at large. Next idea is internationalization and digitalization of money. Internationalization, think of your US dollar. Digitalization, think of cryptocurrency, which has been uh, an effect of globalization. Now, because of globalization, people have to trade with various countries. Now, previously, if you remember, it was the bullion, it was basically your metals, gold, silver, etc., in which people used to trade. And now, if you see that with the rapid increase in globalization, you again need a common currency. You again need something common, which can be used as a medium of transaction. So you find the rise of US dollar, because yes, they have been leading the world when it comes to the economy. So rise in dollar, but over the years, you find a rise in the use of digital currency as well. There are a lot of companies which accept cryptocurrency. That is one. Another idea is not just cryptocurrency. You can the idea of digital transfer, because that would not matter if you transfer money from here to someone else. It would not matter which currency it is, because it will be automatically converted, and your bank can provide you the same. Yes, so your UPI system, etc. Then globalization of investment. Globalization of investment in the sense that various countries, people from various countries, businesses from various countries can invest now, can sit at home and invest in the companies in other countries. And also, you can also think of investment becoming global, in the sense that initially it was limited only to your local area. It was only limited to a few businessmen or a few individuals who had the financial resources. Now you can go and ask for investment anywhere, for that matter. Then think about impact of globalization on agriculture. One is that it has led to an improvement in agriculture, improvement in productivity from agriculture. You have newer things, you have newer technology to be used for agriculture, you have your pesticides, insecticides, etc. Everything again related to globalization. But at the same time, your agriculture has been impacted negatively. Think of climate change once. The first thing is think of climate change. Climate change being pushed, or climate change being sped up because of industrialization, which is a direct cause of globalization, because of which you find the monsoon is not regular, because of which you find the land is degraded, hence decreasing the productivity. Similarly, overuse of pesticides, insecticides is another reason of detriment, which has been detrimental to our agriculture. Then your globalization has given new markets, has opened up new markets for our agricultural produce, has opened up various food processing units. Now we have bigger market for our agricultural product. Thinking of other negatives, you can think of the state of our farmers. You can think of these big MNCs, think of these big MNCs taking up produce from these poor farmers, getting into a contract, taking their produce for a very low rate and selling it at a higher price in the market. So yes, export of basmati rice. Again, think of GI tag. Think of Alfonso mango or Ratnagiri mango being sold everywhere in the world, making it popular for that matter. So you can think about both positives and negatives of agriculture. The idea is, if you get a question on agriculture, if you get a question of impact of globalization on agriculture, you should be able to approach it. One idea is, the first idea is, look at various features related to agriculture. The thing is, agriculture will need inputs, then agriculture has to process it and provide an output. And you look at positive and negative impact in all these dimensions. So basic inputs, for example, your seeds, think of your high yielding variety seeds. Other inputs like water, think of better irrigation system. But also think of your delayed monsoon or irregular monsoon. Think of various other impacts of climate change, like your floods, droughts, etc. So similarly, when you have to look at impact of globalization or any other force on anything, you always try to break it down so that your answer is more structured, rather than just starting it, or rather than going haywire that, okay, I now remember this, I'll write this. Better than that is structuring it properly. Then think about working class. Working class we have already discussed with MNCs. So think of it. Now the working class, one, you have more opportunities, more job opportunities. A lot of them can be engaged in organized sector, who will get social security, who will get insurance, who will get good working conditions. Also at the same time, because working class, there is working class from unorganized sector as well, who has seen a negative impact for that matter. So no, because these MNCs, for instance, they influence government policies, and with their influence, with their influence, they'll try to negotiate with the government what is best for them. But then who will think about this working class? But also, if you look at working class, now with the various ideas, with the international ideas, international political ideas, we have labor unions who can fight for their rights for that matter. Then you think about poverty. Now, if we talk about the LPG reforms, the basic idea was that they will fix the current issue that we have in our society, and ultimately look at the West. They have been successful in eliminating poverty to a great extent. Look at their steep rise. with in terms of development, in terms of socio-economic development. And that is was the idea that there was a push towards globalization, liberalization, and privatization across the globe. But if you look at poverty, and this will be dealt with in poverty, but if you think about poverty, you'll find that yes, with creation of new jobs, with creation of new employment opportunities for people, with a lot of contribution to your government in terms of revenue, then the rise of civil society, because civil society will, because we have a lot of, think of international NGOs who are working for the betterment of our poor. So think of those. The increase in those has been a positive impact of globalization when it comes to poverty. But at the same time, they have increased poverty as well. Yes, it is decreasing, it is going down if you look at the proportion, if you look at the percentage. But otherwise, in absolute numbers, not so much so. Also, when we deal with poverty, we will talk about the divergence between poverty and hunger, how we have been faring with respect to poverty and hunger both. And you will understand there more. So yes, your social security schemes. One is, this idea is coming from with the help of globalization, about providing social security to your people. Another thing is, with globalization, with increase in the number of industries, with government revenues rising, you can say that yes, government can invest more and more in social security of the people. Then you think of cottage industry, increased competition by the MNCs, they are running out of business. At the same time, you'll find with localization, and that will be discussed as well, you'll find that people now are also, because of globalization, because of the rise of mass media, because of the expansion of mass media, you find that more and more people are interested in these handmade products, in these organic products, thereby giving a push to these cottage industries. And for that matter, you'll find that the products that these cottage industries provide are not they are, those products are also finding not just national but international market. So globalization can have both positive and negative impacts on cottage industry. Now, related to the economic impact of globalization, is something called neocolonialism. Now, what was colonialism? Colonialism was one country taking over another country with respect to their political and economic system, and making laws for them. Those laws were ultimately for the benefit of the mother country. That they, for example, take example of Britain and India. Now, Britain, or your East India Company, initially they took over India. They started making laws. They first took the political control, direct political control, and they started making different laws, which were ultimately for the economic benefit of the Britishers. Now, is it possible to make a colony in modern times? And the answer is no. Now, uh, because of the international organizations we have, because of the international cooperation we have, it is not possible to directly take over another country. But also, you'll find that this can be done indirectly. Think of China. China goes to a country, goes to an underdeveloped country or a developing country, and they go and start investing in their economy heavily. And with this investment, they find that yes, a lot of development happens in those countries. But then China would ask for different kinds of favors. China would say that I want to set up an security base, or want to set up a naval base in your country at a location of my choice. And the country would say, no, this is not right, because we have a treaty with another country. We also have relations with them. And China would say that I'll take out all my money that I've invested in your country, and your economy and your political system, the entire system will collapse. Now, what is this? This is indirect control of another economy. Think of another way. Think of flooding your cheap products in other markets. In that way, you completely destroy the local industry there in that country. And these forms of colonialism are called neo-colonialism, wherein financial exploitation of a country's aggressive power and control over another. This is what happens. Yes, so the example can be the trap. They did it with Sri Lanka, etc. Okay, so Prashant is asking, by globalization, how globalization gives a push to welfareism, or the idea of welfare state. One thing is, the idea of welfare state has been adopted by various countries because of the impact of globalization, because they got to know about this idea. Another idea is, think about your multidimensional poverty. Think about the role of UN there. Now, what happens is, whenever, no matter which country it is, now with the global uh, political system, having an eye on each and every country, they would say that there are poor in your country and you're not helping them. They're poor in your country who need healthcare, who need education. Why are you not doing it? And from there, if you extend this to your sustainable development goals, those sustainable development goals have been agreed upon by multiple countries, almost all countries. Those sustainable goals come from the mutual understanding of what are the burning issues, what are the various issues, or what are the various targets that we as a global community should achieve, which has been done because of globalization. Now, because of your sustainable development goals that we have to reach by 2030, you find governments, not just in India, but across the globe, governments working in the direction of education, investing in education, investing in healthcare, etc. Why did that happen? Because of globalization. So I hope you got your answer. So yes, and also you can also think of the failure of global system in this regard, because think of your Russia-Ukraine war. Is the global community doing enough to save Ukraine or to stop that war from happening? Yes, various countries are taking a few steps. They're imposing restrictions, etc. But are we doing enough? Has the war stopped? Has the uh, Russian aggression on Ukraine stopped? And the answer is no. So yes, we can at times look at the failure of global system. What China did with respect to neo-colonialism, see, neo-colonialism, basically, if you understand colonialism, you understand this as a new form of colonialism, wherein you're not directly changing the policies, you are not taking a direct control of a country, but you are exercising that control indirectly through your economic power. Previously, you were doing it with your political power and ultimately converting it to economic gains. That was colonialism. Now you do it indirectly with your economic power. You do not have to gain a direct control of that country. That is what the idea of neocolonialism is. And you have examples of China. Now let's look at political impact of globalization. Now the first basic thing is the exchange of political ideas. The think of our Indian Constitution, you'll find various components in Indian Constitution which have been influenced directly by various political ideas. Think about liberty. Think about first the idea of democracy. Right? It has been coming from various other countries, and not just that. It is not just limited to political system, but again, this exchange of political ideas also impacts the societies. So the idea of capitalism, the idea of having a wonderful economy, having a wonderful system which is market oriented, which which promotes profit making, was being uh, was being uh, uh, was being has traveled across the globe, and most of the countries went for that way. Yes, a few for a few it worked out well, But again, for a few, it did not work out well. Then think of the rise of various international organizations and how they would impact state sovereignty. The example of, say, WTO. Now, various organizations, international organizations meant for international cooperation, have come up. And these ultimately lead to dilution of the state sovereignty. So the states now cannot take all the decisions on their own. They have to be in the greater framework of these international organizations. So take example of your various trade related decisions. Take example of any kind of political decisions, right? It is again dependent on these international organizations. They decide a lot for us. They decide the larger political framework for us. They decide what has to be the relationship between two countries, how it is supposed to be, and which leads to a diminishing state sovereignty. But again, there has been a rise in international relations. Now, if we talk about India, we have open channels with pretty much every country. So we have international relations. We are maintaining bilateral relations with a lot of countries. But again, because of these international relations, there can be cooperation that you can find cooperation on various areas. In various areas, be it related to environment, be it various free trade agreements, be it the idea of European Union. But also, because of globalization, you find a lot of conflicts happening. Think of conflict between two countries. You have various examples. Then our policy making process. One thing is that our policy is being influenced. What does the idea of diminishing state sovereignty says? That now our policies have more and more impact of global organizations. Then also, if you see that a lot of innovation, a lot of new ideas come up in our policy making because of globalization, because of our exposure to different countries, because of our bureaucrats traveling to other countries to understand their systems. And also, if you talk about policy making, we take help from various international organizations, various think tanks. And in that sense, you can say that our policy making has been globalized. Think of civil society. Now, without going in details of civil society, you think of various socio-political movements, you think of your NGOs, right? So think of civil society. There has been a definite growth in civil society. Now, what happens is, and now when I'm talking about civil society right now, I'm talking in international terms, not talking specifically in terms of India. Now, what happens is that with the rise in the power of the state, if the power of the government goes on rising, you can see that ultimately a democratic state can become despotic. There would be no rights left for the citizens if the power of the state goes on rising. Now, if you have to keep a check on this power of the state, you need people to participate in political decisions or in political movements. So if the state is not caring about various human rights, if the state is not looking into, say, the situation that is happening in your area, what would you do? You will form a group and you will start raising your voice. You'll try to address or try to uh, make the government listen to you, because as an individual, you cannot. So you would need participation of other members of the society. So the rise of civil society as a check on the on the power of the state. Now, in our context, you find that there has been a rise of civil society. There are various NGOs that are now working in various countries. Now, these NGOs can work in a positive direction, but they can also become a security threat to other nations. What if they are carrying out the kind of activities which will ultimately lead to, say, internal troubles in that country? Then also, if we talk about civil society, you think of various social movements. A movement that starts in one country goes on traveling across the world. So Me Too movement, which started primarily in the West, had found ground in almost every country. People started coming out. If you remember that hashtag Me Too movement, right? Hashtag Me Too. Similarly, if we talk about the levels of awareness, there has also been a rise, because now it is not just domestic organizations, but you have organizations available across the world who have an eye on what is happening. And ultimately, if a country has to sustain, if you want investment, you have to be politically stable, right? If you want investment, you have to be politically stable, because think of your investment. Would you want to invest in the United States, or would you want to invest in Afghanistan? You would definitely say United States. Why? Because there is political instability in Afghanistan. Even though it might promise better returns, but you know that yes, if the returns are high, so is the risk. So political stability is important. And now every country has to show that we are politically stable, we are faring well, so that the global community does not interfere and their investment, everything goes on business as usual. And therein, you find that governments have to give in to the civil society at times. They have to give in to the various demands of civil society, which can again be up. You can think about positive or negative in it. Then yes, the rising levels of public awareness, and it can be directly related to media, the expansion of media. Now people understand the importance of human rights. Now people understand the importance of education. If there is any new idea coming up, think about legalizing homosexuality. Think about a push towards same-sex marriage, which has not happened yet, but yes, there's definitely a push. Think about equal treatment of each and every section of the society. So what are these direct impacts of globalization? If you think about corruption, one is, because of globalization, there is rise in technology. Because of globalization, you have various regulatory authorities that have come up, and you find that corruption can become difficult. Right now, you have your cell phone. If there is an official who asks for money or wants any kind of favor, you can just record it, circulate it globally within a minute. But also, at the same time, you find there has been a rise in the scale of corruption. If you think about the scale of corruption, now you have tax havens wherein you can push whatever amount of money it is that you want without anyone knowing about it. Think of your Swiss bank, right? Think of organized crime for that matter. Absolutely. So the scale of corruption has increased. Then think of terrorism. One is, with global boundaries getting fluid, there will be definitely a rise in terrorism, but also there has been increased cooperation with respect to terrorism. Now, the next idea is your environmental impact. One thing is that can be understood as a cause of spread of globalization is cooperation in the fight against, and primarily in the fight against, climate change. You can think of your International Solar Alliance. You can think of various protocols and various meetings that happen over the years. Then also, there has been a rise of international organizations, because generally these international organizations start these various protocols, right? So you can think of your COPs. You can think of you can think of UNICEF, for example. They are working, yes, primarily for the children. And also, you'll find various UN bodies. You can think of UNFCCC. They also work in the field of environment. Similarly, with this cooperation, so first thing is that you identify that yes, climate change is a problem. Once you identify, you try to rope in as many members as possible. to legitimize that idea that yes, climate change is happening, it is definitely a threat, and now more and more people are saying so. Suppose that you would want discussions across stakeholders to happen, that yes, this is a problem which needs to be addressed, and you have to reach a conclusion. Once you've reached a conclusion, you would see that what are the ways in which we can control this problem of climate change. We can control the negative impacts of climate change. And then you'll come up with the idea. And therein you find the idea of sustainable development, which became central to all the countries. Why? Because there was global agreement on those ideas. And also, with respect to any kind of new ideas, you find that, say the Japanese are working on carbon sinks, for instance. Now we will get that idea. We'll also start working on it. Similarly, there is your Lafarge Group, cement industry. They have Geocycle, which is their arm, which takes care of the environmental problems that the cement industry creates. Now, Geocycle is working on various projects in India, for that matter. Why? Globalization. Similarly, the public awareness will find a mention everywhere, because there has been a definite rise in public awareness. Now, people are becoming more and more aware about these problems. Similarly, you are talking about Paris Convention, you are talking about carbon trading, etc. You can talk about the push towards your e-vehicles, right? Electronic vehicles, or your solar vehicles, for that matter. Where is that coming from? Your global community. Then pollution has been uh, a result of globalization. Because of globalization, you set up industries. These industries pollute your land, water, and air. So pollution as a direct consequence of globalization. But also, if you think about newer means to measure the air pollution, newer means to control pollution, think of your indoor purifiers, right? You can see that you have various benefits with respect to globalization, that now you have better reach to technologies or newer ways to target or control pollution. So uh, think of the idea of putting a congestion tax on Indian roads. Now it has not worked out, but yes, it was there during your Delhi pollution times. It was there last year as well, that wherever you have high density of traffic, there you should put congestion tax, so that people stay away from bringing in their cars. That you have to pay more and more, you have to pay more tax, or you have to pay, say, a fee to get your car into a congested area, because that will work as a incentive to use public transport. Similarly, the Japanese laying metro, your Delhi Metro, the collaboration with the Japanese in creating Delhi Metro, which ultimately is a better thing. One, uh, a push towards public transport, which directly impacts your levels of pollution, because less and less people would be using other means of transport or their personal vehicles. Also, you find that this technology has become a lifeline, because transportation is something that is an essential today, because work from home is limited to a certain section, is limited to a certain sector. But again, we need generally to travel for work, we need to travel for school, we need to travel for healthcare, we need to travel to meet people, etc. So which has become a lifeline of our economy, because otherwise, think of various industries, various offices that are located in Delhi, in the interiors of Delhi. Without this metro, it would have become impossible for them to grow. Okay, so these can be a few ideas related to impact of globalization, and by now you would have understood how you have to approach it. Yes, so you're talking about dumping of waste in marine bodies. Yes, because of globalization, but again, globalization, because of globalization, it got highlighted, and they have to now work on it. Talking about carbon tax, yes. So you can also think of your green bonds, etc. Now let's come to the next part, which is your socio-cultural impact of globalization. What we are going to do here is, we are first going to look at the impact of globalization on various institutions. Institution of family, institution of marriage, caste, religion. Let's think of the impact of globalization on the institution of family. Now, we have already seen the impact of modernization, and we say that a lot of features are similar when it comes to globalization. And if you want to look at the impact on family, what you do is you look at various features and functions of family as an institution and look at how they have changed. So you can think of the size of the family. You can think of various other features that you can think of. Then you can think of function, right? So this is something that we have done previously. What you have to do is you have to apply the same logic here as well. Apply the same logic and you will be able to understand. So yes, you are talking about size. You can talk about various features, how internally it has changed. You can think about various functions, the function of socialization, etc. I think you can uh, deal the same way with marriage, because marriage is something we have also discussed today. Now think of your institution of, think of religion for that matter. Think of religion. How do you break down religion? Yes, so in marriage, you are discussing about new things, the kind of new programs that have come up in our weddings, cutting of cake, right? Ring ceremonies. Then you think about the way we dress. Then you think about all the paraphernalia that we have in our weddings, etc. Okay, so think about religion first. Let's think about religion, because family is something that you can easily understand now. All you have to see is various features, how they got impacted, and apart from that, you can just think of newer ways. So previously we were saying that our choice of spouse is limited to our caste, etc., but now it is not. And also with globalization, you have chances of getting a match from someone else, of someone from another country. Okay, let's talk about religion. So let's talk about the components of religion. The first idea is arrival of new religions in the country and their interaction with our indigenous religion. One is that. Then you can think of various rituals. Then you can think of the importance, think of the diversity of religions, right? You can also think of the commercialization of religion. Great. So first, think about the diversity. Has globalization increased the diversity of religion in the country? You can say absolutely yes. But also, you think about the religions which have been various animistic religions or religions related to tribals, who used to say worship nature, who used to worship trees or animals or sky, which have been subsumed into these bigger religions, who have been subsumed in Hinduism, Christianity in your northeast, Hinduism in your central India and your say Tripura, for example. So which has led to a decrease in diversity of religions. So diversity of religions, one is entry of new religions, and also the there are two ideas that will come to. But the first thing is, you can right now you can think of the assimilation in major religions. Do not worry about assimilation. Right now, you understand it as that these religions, the various animistic practices have been shifted towards or have been assimilated or have become a part of Hinduism, and they are following, say, either Christianity or Hinduism for that matter. So homogenization can be thought of in terms of rituals. Okay, so one idea is that there has been entry of new religions, which has increased the diversity, but at the same time, assimilation of these animistic religions into Hinduism and Christianity for that matter has led to a decrease in diversity. Then you think about importance as discussed in modernization, that because of secularization, the importance of religion is going down. The importance of religion in our education, the importance of religion in our personal lives, everywhere it has been going down. Similarly, think of various rituals associated with religion. Now you'll find with globalization, a few of our rituals are becoming important, are finding ground across the globe. And also at the same time, you find that we are, we are not following our rituals anymore. We're not following all the rituals that were related to our religion. Why? Because of the impact of the global. And you have already been giving examples here. Then also commercialization of religion can be understood. Atheism is increasing, yes. So now you can get religious donations from anywhere, sitting in your own country. Yes. Okay, so you have a webinar today. So what we'll do is we will wind up. So I hope you have understood the various dimensions of religion. I have already given you a question from the previous chapter, so you can try to answer that same question. And tomorrow what we'll do is we will look at various other institutions of the Indian society which find an impact of globalization, and also look at various sections of Indian society and how globalization has impacted them. So we'll do it to a few, we'll do the same practice with a few, and rest I would like you to take up yourself. Okay, so with this, let's conclude our discussion for today, and we will start from where we left tomorrow.